Before we begin the story, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. By doing so, you help the channel grow and bring you even more interesting stories. That morning began just like thousands of others in our 28th floor apartment overlooking the Manhattan skyline, which was slowly waking up from its slumber. The air was still crisp, holding the last breath of the night's dew. This freshness seeped through the slightly opened balcony window, which I always intentionally left that way. I always loved that atmosphere, that thick silence. It seemed as if the massive city held its breath for a brief moment. Right before the endless hustle began, I stepped silently across the cold marble floor. I had developed this habit over many years so as not to wake Andrew, my husband, the center of my universe for the past 11 years. My morning routine was almost a soothing ritual. Brew some dark roast coffee, linger on the balcony for a moment to feel the breeze on my face, and then head to the bathroom to get ready. Everything was on autopilot movements my muscles had memorized. In the bathroom, decorated in shades of ivory and brushed gold, I turned on the hot water to wash my face and started brushing my teeth. The sharp, minty foam filled my mouth. And right then, in the middle of the monotonous brushing, I saw it. Andrew's cell phone was resting on the marble vanity next to a nearly empty bottle of liquid hand soap. Its screen, previously pitch black, suddenly lit up, emitting a glow that pierced my eyes in the dim bathroom light. A notification appeared on the lock screen. It wasn't a message from his work Slack channel or a calendar reminder. The sender's name was unfamiliar, a name I had never heard Andrew mention, Natalie. And beneath that name was a short sentence. A sentence that was enough to make my world stop spinning. Can't wait for our weekend at the cabin. Wine and that high-end lingerie I bought. Counting down. The movement of my hand jerked to a halt. The toothbrush was still in my mouth, but I couldn't feel anything anymore. The fresh minty foam now took on a strange bitter taste, slowly dissolving and dripping down the corners of my lips. My eyes were glued to the phone screen. I reread the sentence over and over as if searching for a different meaning, an alternative possibility, even the slightest hint of a misunderstanding. Our cabin, lingerie. Every word was a nail driven straight into my heart. Through the frosted glass door of the shower, I heard the sound of running water. Andrew was taking a shower. I could hear him humming softly. It was an old jazz tune he always played in the car. The sound of the falling water and his careless humming felt like a mockery. I stood there, paralyzed by the proof of betrayal unfolding before my eyes with brutal clarity. And he was just a few steps away, starting his day without any burden, unaware that his world, our world, had just sustained an irreversible crack. The phone screen went dark again, but the phrase was already imprinted in my brain, burned into my retinas. I didn't need to unlock his phone. I didn't need to know more. What I felt in that moment wasn't an explosive shock. Rather, it was a confirmation. The feeling that the final piece of a horrific puzzle I had tried so hard to ignore had finally fallen into place. Over the past few months, there had been many little things that seemed off to me. Andrew started staying late at the office more often, using sudden board meetings as an excuse. Unexpected business trips to Chicago or Miami were announced so abruptly that I barely had time to ask for details. His cell phone, which he used to leave lying around carelessly, was now always placed face down on the table or safely tucked in his pants pocket. He even took it with him to the bathroom. His laptop, which used to be accessible at any time, suddenly had a new password. But what hurt me the most was his gaze. His eyes, which had always looked at me with warmth, with the feeling of coming home, now often slid past me, as if I were just another piece of furniture in the apartment, like a painting on the wall that no longer draws attention after being stared at for too long. I often tried to calm myself. Don't be paranoid, Anastasia. I would whisper to myself during sleepless nights waiting for him. Everyone gets tired. Marriage takes effort. Don't create problems out of thin air. Now standing in front of the sink with a mouthful of toothpaste. I wanted to go back in time and scream at myself. Don't be a fool, Anastasia. Stop making excuses for him. I turned on the faucet, quickly rinsed my mouth, and splashed my face with cold water. My hands didn't shake as I dried off with a towel. Strangely enough, I felt an emptiness, a cold and immense void. It felt as if my soul had detached from my body and was observing everything from the corner of the room. I watched myself continue my routine, applying moisturizer, a little powder, a neutral shade of lipstick. It all felt like a theatrical performance. When I stepped out of the bathroom, Andrew was already dressed. He stood in front of the large mirror in our bedroom, adjusting a navy blue tie. He caught my reflection and smiled, the same smile as every morning, a smile that now seemed like the most disgusting mask I had ever seen. "I have a client seminar in Chicago this weekend, honey," he said, adjusting his shirt collar. "Probably won't be back until Sunday evening. Will you be okay by yourself?" I nodded slowly. My voice sounded more even than I expected. No emotion, no trembling. "Of course, don't forget to pack a warm jacket. Nights in Chicago can get chilly." I didn't ask about Natalie. I didn't ask about the lingerie. I didn't want to ruin the performance he had so carefully orchestrated, because in my cold and empty mind, something else was beginning to form. A plan, a scenario for a counterattack. And until everything was perfectly prepared, I wouldn't say a word. I would play my role flawlessly, too. Just as he was doing that morning, I became the best actress in the drama of his betrayal. I gave him the smile of a loving wife, even though the love that once burned in my heart had now turned to cold ash. And from those ashes, something harder and sharper was beginning to grow. That evening felt longer than usual. The hands on the wall clock moved with agonizing slowness. Every tick echoed in the silence of the apartment. Andrew came home on time with a box of artisan macaroons from my favorite bakery. A small gesture that in other times would have warmed my heart. But that evening it felt like an empty formality, an attempt to hide his lies behind the sweetness of sugar and almond flour. We ate dinner together, chatting about trivial things, his work at the firm, a new project I was immersed in, the ever-worsening Manhattan traffic. On the outside, everything seemed normal, the facade of a happy marriage that we played so masterfully. I had turned into a meticulous observer. I watched Andrew place his phone face down on the table, his eyes occasionally darting toward it as if drawn by an invisible magnet. I watched his smile, which never quite reached his eyes. Every little detail was another piece of evidence reinforcing the certainty that had settled in my mind that morning. Andrew had a habit. Every Thursday night, after playing squash at the club with his buddies, he would come home, drink 2 glasses of bourbon, and go to bed. It was his stress relief ritual, and I knew that after those 2 drinks, he would fall into a deep, dreamless sleep, dead to the world, hearing nothing around him. That evening was a Thursday, a coincidence that felt like destiny. I waited until his breathing became steady and deep. The faint smell of bourbon mixed with the scent of his soap in the cool bedroom air, chilled by the act. I lay next to him, staring at the dark ceiling, letting my racing heart slowly return to a normal rhythm. It was time. Like a thief in my own home, I got out of bed with extreme caution. I walked around to his side of the bed. His phone was charging on the nightstand. The white cable was plugged into the outlet like an umbilical cord, giving it life. I slowly unplugged it. I knew his fingerprint, his right index finger. For years, I had unlocked his phone to set alarms or answer calls while he was driving. An action that was once based on trust had now become the key to his Pandora's box. I took his relaxed hand. His skin was warm. For a fraction of a second, I was overwhelmed by a fleeting memory. The first time that hand held mine so tightly, so confidently, I quickly pushed the memory away. This was no time for nostalgia. I gently pressed the pad of his index finger against the scanner. Click. The screen lit up, revealing perfectly organized apps. My heart beat a little faster. There was no turning back now. I didn't go straight to his messages. I started with the photo gallery, swiping through hundreds of our photos together. Vacations in Miami, my birthday party, candid shots he took when I wasn't looking. They all felt like relics from another person's life. And then I found his hidden folder. It took me a couple of tries to guess the passcode. His birth date proved to be too obvious. Inside was another world, the world of Andrew and Natalie, their selfies in his car, photos in dimly lit coffee shops, and the most painful of all, a photo of them together in front of a wooden house that looked all too familiar. Our cabin in the Adirondacks, the very one we bought 2 years ago, using my year-end bonus as an anniversary gift. A place where we were supposed to create our shared memories. He was already creating them, just not with me. There was even a photo of Natalie alone, smiling triumphantly at the camera, wearing one of Andrew's oversized button-down shirts. Nausea rose in my throat. I swallowed it down and kept going. After the photos, I opened a message. Their text thread was a novel of betrayal at names, plans for secret rendezvous, Andrew's complaints about me, that I was too consumed with my work, that I was too cold, that I didn't care about him. Every sentence was a slap in the face. He painted me as the villain in his story, making it seem like this affair was my fault. And then I found more information about Natalie. Her full name was Natalie Cole, a medical equipment sales rep for a major pharmaceutical company. But the most crucial detail was in one of their older conversations, a phrase that changed everything. Leo will be in Seattle all next week for work. Our place will be empty. Leo, her husband. That meant Natalie was a traitor, too. This wasn't just a problem between Andrew and me. There was another wounded person in this game. Another person whose heart was being broken while they suspected nothing. In that instant, a larger, bolder idea formed in my mind. This was no longer just a wife's revenge. It was a matter of justice. I didn't sleep a wink that night. My hands, now cold and resolute, went to work. I took screenshots of every key conversation, every photo in that hidden folder. I tracked transactions on Andrew's credit card, which was linked to mine. Hotel charges in Chicago on the dates he supposedly had board meetings, receipts from expensive steakhouse we never went to together. I saved it all, archiving it into a secure folder on my own laptop. In a single night, I transformed into a detective, piecing together the fragments of my husband's double life. By dawn, I found what I was looking for. I typed Leo Cole into LinkedIn and added the keyword architect, which had been mentioned in their texts. And there he was. His profile picture showed a man with a strong jawline, slightly messy hair, and a smile that, though it looked tired, felt genuine. His profile stated he was the director of an architectural firm specializing in eco-friendly design. A pang of sympathy for this man struck my heart. He was just as much a victim as I was. I sat in front of my laptop in the dark living room, illuminated only by the glow of the screen. I typed a short message, deleted it, and wrote it again. I did this dozens of times, searching for the right words. Finally, I stopped overthinking and let my fingers move on their own. Hello, Leo. My name is Anastasia Vance. I have reason to believe that my husband Andrew is having an affair with your wife, Natalie. If you're willing to talk, I can share the proof I have. Here is my number. I stared at that paragraph for several minutes. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. I took a deep breath and clicked. The message was sent. Andrew's phone was already back in its exact spot, as if no one had touched it. The morning sun began to peek through the Manhattan skyscrapers. A new day was beginning, and my war was about to break out. The time following that click dragged by with maddening slowness. Every second felt like a grain of sand resisting the fall in an hourglass. I went back to the bedroom, placed Andrew's phone precisely where it had been, and returned to the living room. I sat on the plush sofa, but my body was tense. My morning coffee, usually so delicious, now left a sour taste on my tongue. Outside, New York began to stretch its limbs. The distant honk of a cab, the hum of starting engines. Everything sounded detached and muffled, as if I were in a soundproof bubble. I gripped my phone in my hand. It felt as heavy as a grenade with the pin pulled. All I could do was wait. Wait for the explosion or for the worst outcome that nothing would happen. What if Leo didn't believe me? What if he thought I was a crazy, jealous woman trying to ruin his marriage? Or worse, what if he called Natalie to check and Natalie told Andrew everything? My plan would crumble before it even started. I would look like a fool, a pathetic figure. Thoughts swarmed in my head like a flock of crows. I tried to chase them away by turning on the TV, opening my laptop to check work emails, but it was useless. My concentration was shattered. The numbers in my spreadsheets, which usually seemed so orderly and logical, now danced pointlessly. Anastasia Vance, Chief Financial Officer, known for her composure and ability to control the most complex situations, now felt she had lost control over the only thing that truly mattered, her own life. An hour later, Andrew emerged from the bedroom. He was wearing an impeccable light blue dress shirt, his damp hair slicked back. He kissed me lightly on the forehead, a gesture so automatic I barely felt it. "I'm heading out," he said. "I'll call you when I land in Chicago." "Safe travels," I replied, forcing a smile. As he walked to the door, I felt an overwhelming urge to scream at him, to confront him with all his lies right that second. But I held back. Hot, explosive anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. My anger was cold, icy. I was sharpening it until it became a weapon. After Andrew left, the apartment felt even quieter and emptier. All morning, I paced from the living room to the kitchen and back. Every time my phone vibrated with an email notification or a work Slack message, my heart jumped into my throat. 3 hours felt like 3 years. I was ready to give up, to convince myself that this was a stupid idea. When my phone finally rang, an unknown number flashed on the screen. My hand trembled slightly as I swiped the green icon. I stepped out onto the balcony to get some fresh air and calm my racing heart. "Hello," I said, trying to make my voice sound normal. Silence hung on the other end, just heavy breathing. Then a male voice answered, deep and exhausted. "This is Leo Cole. I got your message." His voice was exactly as I had imagined, outwardly calm. But I could hear a hidden tremor, the tremor of a foundation that had just cracked. "Thank you for calling," I said. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" he asked directly, skipping the pleasantries. I liked that. "I wish it were," I replied. My throat was dry, but I'm afraid it's not. I have proof. Texts, photos, even their plans for this weekend. I heard him sigh heavily. The sigh of a man whose world had just been turned upside down. This weekend, Natalie told me she was going up to the Adirondacks for a corporate retreat with her colleagues. His voice sounded like he was talking more to himself than to me. "My husband told me he was going to a client seminar in Chicago," I countered. "They're planning to meet at our cabin in the Adirondacks." The mention of the Adirondacks hit like a physical blow. The silence on the line grew thicker. The cabin that I bought. "A cabin that you might have designed," I continued. "We were both betrayed in a space that rightfully belongs to us." "What do you want?" he finally asked. There was hesitation in his words. This was the decisive moment. I took a deep breath and summoned all my courage. "I want us to catch them there together before they even have a chance to pop a cork or take off their coats." Silence again. I could picture Leo on the other end processing my words. A crazy request, a scenario straight out of a movie. I was prepared for him to refuse to call me insane. "I don't want a scene," he said after a moment. "I don't want yelling. Neither do I." I quickly replied. "I just want them to see us. I want them to face the truth without the opportunity to spin new lies or make excuses." I heard his breathing again, sensing the internal conflict tearing at him. The desire to run away from this bitter reality fought against the need to face it head-on. "All right," he finally said. The words sounded heavy, filled with resignation and resolve. "But let's meet first. I want to see everything you know with my own eyes." A wave of relief washed over my body, making my knees weak. I wasn't alone. I had an ally. "Of course," I said, "when and where?" We agreed to meet the next morning, Saturday, at a small diner near a gas station off Interstate 87 on the way up to the Adirondacks. Neutral territory halfway between our shattered worlds. Hanging up, I stayed on the balcony, looking out over Manhattan, now bustling with life. My mood had shifted. The emptiness I felt in the morning was now filled with a clear purpose, a strange alliance forged in identical pain. We were two strangers united by betrayal, and we were going to face this storm together. Saturday morning, the sky was overcast and gray, as if the weather itself could feel the tension in the air. I drove alone up the busy interstate. The music that usually accompanied my drives now felt like an irritating distraction, so I turned the radio off. The only sound was the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the steady rumble of the engine. My mind was racing. I ran through every possible scenario of what might happen when I met Leo. I arrived at the rest stop half an hour early. It was fairly crowded. Families heading out for a weekend getaway, and travelers stopping for a break. I chose an inconspicuous booth in the corner of the diner, ordered a black coffee, and sat where I had a clear view of the entrance. Every time the door opened, my heart beat a little faster. At exactly 10 a.m., a tall man in a light brown jacket walked in. His stride was determined, but his shoulders were slightly slumped, as if carrying an invisible weight. I recognized him instantly from his profile picture. Leo. The exhaustion in his eyes was much more palpable in person. He looked around and our eyes met. A flicker of recognition passed through his face. I gave a slight nod. He walked over to my booth and sat down across from me. No words, no formal greetings, no introductions. We already knew each other in the strangest, most painful way possible. "Do you want to order something?" I offered, trying to break the awkward silence. He shook his head. "No, thank you. Let's get down to business." I sighed and pulled my phone from my purse. I placed it on the table between my coffee cup and a small bottle of hand sanitizer. I opened the photo gallery, navigated to the folder I had prepared, and slid the phone toward him. "The passcode is 0000. "Here," I said quietly. Leo stared at the phone for a few moments before picking it up. He had large, strong hands, the hands of an architect, a man who builds things. The irony was cruel. Hands that had built so much were now forced to hold the evidence of what had been destroyed. He started swiping through the screen with his thumb. I watched his face closely. I saw his jaw clench, reading the affectionate texts between Andrew and Natalie. I saw a muscle twitch in his temple at the sight of their selfies where they were smiling so happily. I saw him hold his breath looking at the credit card statements, the hotel rooms, and romantic dinners. But the strongest reaction came from one specific photo. The picture of Natalie posing on the deck of the cabin in the Adirondacks. I watched his hand grip the phone. His knuckles turned white as his eyes locked onto the details in the background. The wooden beams he had probably selected. The design of the railing, the floor tiles. In that moment, I realized he wasn't just seeing a photo of his unfaithful wife. He was seeing a betrayal inside a masterpiece of his own making. He saw lies desecrating a space he might have appreciated or even helped consult on. He placed the phone back on the table very slowly as if it were fragile crystal. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes for a second, and let out an incredibly heavy sigh. "I picked out those floor tiles myself," he rasped. "Every little detail of our own house I designed. But Natalie always said she preferred going to places like this cabin because it was quieter. She told me our house felt too modern, too cold. He let out a dry laugh devoid of any humor. Turns out she just didn't like going anywhere with me. Silence enveloped our table. I gave him time to process. I knew that pain, the pain of realizing that a place you considered sacred had been violated. I suspected it. He spoke again, staring blankly out the window. For a long time, she was growing distant, getting angry over minor things, refusing to have serious conversations or go to couples therapy. She always said I worked too much, that I didn't have time for her. Now I understand. She didn't need my time because she was giving all of hers to someone else. It was my turn to share my story about Andrew, about how the little lies piled up into a mountain, about my ignored feelings, about how our finances were strained due to Andrew's lavish lifestyle, a fact Leo was unaware of. We talked for almost an hour, not like two strangers, but like two people in the same boat, caught together in a storm of betrayal. We were no longer alone. I actually have a spare key to your cabin, Leo said suddenly. His eyes met mine with a new gleam, a gleam of resolve. Natalie doesn't know I kept it from when I helped your husband assess the property for renovations last year. Andrew thinks I'm on a site visit in Seattle. She has no idea I'm anywhere near upstate New York. Then we'll go first. I said we'll wait for them there, but like you said, no screaming, no scenes. We'll just sit there. Let them see us, and the truth will do the rest. Leo agreed completely. Our plan now felt real, tangible. We ironed out the details. They would arrive around 6 p.m. the next day. We would be there early in the morning to set our stage. We would be both the audience and the lead actors in the final performance of our marriages. When we parted ways outside the diner, there was no handshake, no long goodbyes. Just a curtain nod, a silent understanding. We were partners in this painful mission. Driving back to the city, I felt strange. My burden hadn't gotten lighter, but I was no longer carrying it alone. There was someone else who understood, someone else who would stand beside me when the storm broke. The sky remained gray, but I felt like I saw a faint ray of light in the distance. Not the light of hope to fix what was broken, but the light of a definitive ending. And for now, that was enough. Sunday morning, I drove out of Manhattan while the sky was still painted a pale purple. The roads were empty, allowing me to drive in silence, accompanied only by my thoughts. As I left the city behind, the air blowing through the cracked window grew crisper. I began to smell the pine needles and the fresh lake water. The Adirondacks, a place that was supposed to be a sanctuary, a keeper of sweet memories. Now it felt like a battlefield I was marching toward. The cabin sat somewhat isolated at the end of a short dirt road surrounded by dense woods. As I turned onto the gravel driveway, I saw it. A 2-story wooden structure that seemed to blend perfectly into nature. Beautiful, serene, and full of lies. I parked my car next to a silver sedan that was already there. Leo's car. He had beaten me here. My heart beat a little faster. This was reality. This was actually happening. I grabbed my purse from the passenger seat, took a deep breath to steady myself, and got out of the car. The morning mountain air was chilly and slightly damp. In the distance, the wind rustling through the pines provided a melancholic soundtrack. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly and stepped inside. Leo was standing in front of the large living room window that looked directly out onto the lake. He held a mug of coffee, a thin wisp of steam rising from it. He didn't turn around when I walked in, as if he already sensed my presence. "How long have you been here?" My voice sounded a bit hoarse arrow. "About an hour," he replied, still staring at the water. I needed some time to take this place in again. I understood what he meant. I dropped my bag on one of the sofas and walked over to stand beside him, looking at the same view. The lake that morning was calm, a lean gray. I remembered standing in this exact spot with Andrew 3 years ago after my miscarriage. Andrew had held me tightly. He promised we would get through it together, that this place would witness us rebuilding our happiness. That promise now felt like poison. "The last time I was here was 3 years ago," I said quietly. More to myself than to Leo. After losing our first baby, Leo finally turned to look at me. In his tired eyes, I saw a flicker of empathy, the understanding of a man who knows loss. "Natalie desperately wanted kids, too," he said softly. "After 2 failed rounds of IVF, she stopped talking about it. I thought it was because it hurt too much. Turns out her mind was occupied with something else. We fell back into silence, each lost in our own pain. There were no tears, just a heavy quiet filled with unspoken words and broken promises. In that silence, we found a strange connection. We weren't friends, not even close acquaintances. We were 2 wounded souls standing in the ruins of our marriages, trying to find a way not to collapse along with them. "Do you think we're taking this too far?" A tiny sliver of doubt crept into my mind. Leo slowly shook his head, his gaze returning to the lake. "No, maybe if this were just about revenge, but it's not. It's about making them face reality without the sugarcoating. It's about taking back the truth they stole from us." His words gave me strength. Yes, he was right. It wasn't about hurting them. It was about stopping our own pain, about closing the chapter in a way that left no unanswered questions, no room for further manipulation. "Then let's set the stage," I said. My voice grew firmer. We moved not like hosts preparing for a party, but like crime scene investigators reconstructing a scene. Every movement was loaded with meaning, a silent ritual. I started by wiping down the long wooden dining table in the center of the room, a table where Andrew and Natalie had probably sat often planning their next lies. I scrubbed the surface until it gleamed, as if trying to erase the residue of their betrayal. Leo went to his car and came back with a bottle of red wine. "Natalie's favorite Pen Noir," he said, placing it dead center on the table. A small detail designed to inflict maximum discomfort. I pulled 4 crystal wine glasses from the kitchen cabinet, the very glasses Andrew always insisted on using when we came here. It was part of his ritual of showing off his refined taste. I lined them up perfectly on the table, 2 on one side, 2 on the other. A perfect arrangement for a confrontation. We rearranged 2 large armchairs, so they had their backs to the front door. That way, when they walked in, they would have no choice but to walk around the chairs and face us directly. We weren't going to ambush them from behind. We were waiting for them face to face. We adjusted the lighting in the room to be warm and yellowish, not too bright to cause immediate panic, but well lit enough so we could catch every nuance of the expressions that would soon cross their faces. We wanted to see it all. The shock, the guilt, the fear. "How do you think they'll react?" I asked as we sat down for a moment to evaluate our work. The room looked so normal, so peaceful, a perfect trap. Leo shook his head. "Natalie will cry. It's her weapon of choice. Andrew, I don't know. Maybe he'll get angry. Maybe he'll beg. But of one thing, I'm certain. Neither of them will be prepared for the fact that we know everything. They won't be prepared for us." We spent the rest of the day talking no longer about the betrayal, but about ourselves. I told him about my dream of opening a small independent bookstore in coastal Maine, a dream Andrew had always scoffed at, calling it unrealistic and a poor Roy. Leo talked about how he almost quit architecture to move to France and study pastry baking. We talked about the versions of ourselves we had long lost, buried under layers of compromises and sacrifices for our marriages. Outside, the sky slowly began to paint itself in hues of orange. "The wall clock read 5 p.m. less than an hour," I said quietly. "Are you scared?" Leo looked me in the eye. "I'm not scared of the truth. I'm scared of forgiving something that doesn't deserve forgiveness." I nodded slowly. We walked out onto the deck and stood side by side, watching the sunset. A light breeze carried the scent of pine and absolute silence. Time seemed to stand still. We were ready. The stage was set. Now, all we had to do was wait for the lead actors to arrive. At 5:57 p.m., the air inside the cabin became so thick and tense, it felt like a guitar string ready to snap. Leo and I sat silently in the two armchairs facing away from the door. We were like two statues waiting for the curtain to rise. On the table between us sat the bottle of Pinot Noir, surrounded by the empty crystal glasses. Resting on the chair next to me was a thick manila envelope. Inside was all our ammunition, printed copies of their texts, credit card statements, and even a short audio recording of a call to Andrew's executive assistant, who breezily confirmed that no seminars were scheduled in Chicago this weekend. We hadn't come empty-handed, and then we heard it, the crunch of gravel under car tires. The sound was so loud in the quiet woods that it pierced straight through my chest. Leo turned and looked at me. His eyes asked a question without words. I said nothing, just gave a short, firm nod. It was time. A black SUV pulled up right in front of the deck. We could see it clearly through the large windows. Andrew got out of the driver's side first. He wore a stylish leather jacket carrying a small duffel bag in one hand and a gift bag in the other. He looked relaxed, happy. Next, Natalie emerged from the passenger side. She held a bouquet of soft pink tulips. They were laughing together. The sound of their laughter, joyful and carefree, drifted faintly through the glass. They looked like a pair of newlyweds arriving at their private paradise. The sight was a knife to the gut, the illusion of their happiness built entirely on our pain. A key turned in the lock. The heavy wooden door creaked open. Natalie walked in first. With a smile still playing on her lips, she stepped elegantly into the room. Her gaze swept across the space, and then her smile froze. Literally froze halfway, as if someone had hit the pause button on her life. Her eyes, shining just a second ago, widened, filling first with confusion, then absolute terror as her gaze shifted from me to Leo sitting beside me. Andrew, following close behind, bumped into her back when she stopped dead in her tracks. "What's wrong, babe?" His voice was still cheerful. Then he looked up, following Natalie's gaze, and in that second, our eyes met. I watched the transformation happen in a matter of heartbeats. Confusion, shock, denial, and finally, panic so pure it was almost tangible. The gift bag slipped from his hand. A bottle of expensive champagne inside hit the hardwood floor and shattered against the table leg. Pop! A loud crack followed by the sound of fizzing foam, filling the room with the sharp smell of alcohol. Natalie's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. The bouquet of tulips slipped through her fingers. Delicate pink petals scattered across the floor. It was the perfect visual metaphor for what had just happened. Her fantasy had shattered into pieces. The silence that followed the breaking glass returned heavier and more suffocating than before. I let the moment stretch for a few seconds so the reality of their situation could fully sink in. Then I spoke. My voice was light as a breeze, totally calm, standing in stark contrast to the electrified atmosphere. "Welcome to your weekend." Andrew was paralyzed. His lips pressed into a hard line. The color drained from his face. Natalie took half a step back, glancing at Leo as if begging for help, for a way out of this nightmare. But there was no exit, nowhere to hide. The curtain was up. The play was beginning. The shards of the champagne bottle gleamed on the hardwood floor, reflecting the warm light of the room. The sharp smell of alcohol now mixed with the scent of trampled tulips. Amidst this miniature disaster, the four of us remained frozen, locked in a surreal tableau. Andrew moved first. He was the first to try and gather the pieces of a reality that had just blown up in his face. "Anna," he croaked. He took a step forward, raising a hand as if trying to calm me down, as if I were a wild animal that needed taming. A dry laugh, entirely devoid of amusement, escaped my lips. A cliché, the first line of defense for any caught cheater. "Ah, I see," I said, tilting my head slightly. And what is this supposed to be? Explain it to me, Andrew. What should I think of Natalie's text saying she can't wait to see you at our cabin or the lingerie she packed just for you? Andrew's face contorted. He clearly hadn't expected me to know such specific details. His eyes darted toward Natalie in panic. I kept going. My voice was steady and flat like a prosecutor reading off charges. What should I think of the credit card charges at steakhouses we've never been to? Or the Uber receipts taking you to Natalie's neighborhood on the Upper East Side when you were supposedly working late? Every question was a precise strike. I knew it hit home because his shoulders slumped and he couldn't meet my eyes. It was Leo's turn to stand up. He didn't look at Andrew. His eyes were locked onto his wife, who was trembling near the door. And what about me? Natalie? Leo's deep voice shook with restrained emotion. What am I supposed to think? You told me you were going on a corporate retreat up here with your team. You even texted me last night right before you turned your phone off. Good night. Miss you. Did I imagine that, too? Leo's question shattered Natalie's defenses. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Leo, please don't do this. She managed to choke out between sobs. Don't do what? Leo's voice rose an octave. His pain was audible. Now, don't stand here and face you. Don't listen to the truth. Don't watch my wife cheat on me in a house that I helped renovate for my own clients. That last sentence was a low blow, even for me. Leo had poured his expertise into this place, and they had defiled it. I stood up, walked over to the table, and picked up the thick envelope. I didn't open it. I just tossed it onto the table with a loud enough smack to demand their attention. I didn't come here to argue, I said, my voice commanding the room once more. I came with facts. Andrew stared at the envelope like it was a venomous snake. In a surge of anger and desperation, he snatched it and ripped it open. He pulled out the stack of papers. I watched his eyes scan the lines rapidly, saw his expression morph as he registered the printouts of their texts, the photos, the financial records. His eyes, previously wide with panic, now flushed with rage. A few seconds later, he slammed the papers onto the floor. You spied on me? He shouted, finally losing his composure. I looked him dead in the eye, unflinching. I didn't spy on you, Andrew. I verified the truth. A truth I suspected for far too long. And since you were so meticulous in your lies, I had to be even more meticulous to uncover them. Natalie collapsed into one of the dining chairs, her body shaking with sobs. Leo didn't move to comfort her. He just stood there looking at his wife with a mixture of disappointment, anger, and profound sadness. How long? Leo asked Natalie. His voice had dropped again, but it was colder now. 7 months, Natalie whispered. 7 months? 210 days of lies. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. For those 7 months, I had still been trying to be a good wife, trying to fix whatever I thought was broken in our marriage, unaware that I was fighting a battle alone. Andrew walked toward me again, this time with a pleading look. Anastasia, I screwed up. I know I made a terrible mistake, but that doesn't mean I stopped loving you. I took a step back, putting distance between us. Stop, I said, and for the first time, my voice wavered, not from sadness, but from a fury that had finally peaked. Do not talk to me about love, Andrew. If the love you're talking about allows you to cheat on me with another woman, I don't want it. I paused, letting a bitter memory rise to the surface as I looked around the room. And if the love you're talking about allows you to bring your mistress to the exact place where we lost our baby, you can keep it. My words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Total silence fell over the room. Even Natalie's sobbing stopped. I saw Andrew freeze. He looked as if he had been physically struck. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. That memory, our deepest wound, was the ultimate weapon he could never defend against. I gave him one last look. You can leave now, or you can sit down and listen to the rest. But if you think there's any chance of forgiveness, then you don't know who I am at all." Leo turned to Natalie, then looked at me. "I need some air." "Me, too." I nodded. We both walked outside, passing Andrew and Natalie, who remained rooted to their spots. We went out onto the deck, leaving them alone among the wreckage of the lies we had just detonated. Outside, the upstate New York sky had grown almost completely dark. The wind through the pines blew harder now. The storm was just beginning. After spending a few minutes on the deck, letting the crisp air clear our heads, we went back into the living room. The atmosphere inside felt like the aftermath of a war. Andrew and Natalie were now sitting in chairs far apart, avoiding each other's gaze. The papers detailing their affair were still scattered across the floor like dead leaves. The air was thick with regret and ugly truths. I pulled out a chair and sat directly across from Andrew. Leo sat next to me, his cold, piercing gaze locked onto Natalie. For a long time, no one said a word. Finally, I placed a second folder on the table. It was blue, unlike the manila envelope. I felt the mood shift instantly. "Andrew," I began looking him squarely in the eyes. "Did you ever tell Natalie why we've had separate bank accounts for the last 6 years? Andrew stiffened. He looked at me with a pleading expression. "Anastasia, this has nothing to do with—" "I'll tell her," I interrupted, cutting off his excuse. I turned to Natalie, who was now looking at me in confusion. "You probably don't know this, Natalie, but this man you admire so much racked up over $75,000 in credit card debt on sports betting and luxury expenses back in 2018. His parents had to secretly bail him out to save his career in finance. After that, I forced us to separate our finances. Not out of spite, but because I saw firsthand how well he could hide something so massive." The shock on Natalie's face was genuine. "I'm sure, Andrew. You never told her about that because it doesn't fit the narrative." Andrew snapped back, defensive. "It does," I replied calmly. "It's all about the lies. Andrew, you justified your affair by telling your mistress that I was too busy, too cold. But you conveniently forgot to mention that I was the one carrying the majority of our financial burden. I'm the one who paid the mortgage on this cabin every month while you played around and lied behind my back." Andrew lowered his head. He had nothing left to say. My truth had stripped away all his excuses. Now it was Leo's turn. His voice, steady but icy, was directed at Natalie. "And you, Natalie, you told me the bank was delaying the approval for our home equity loan to fix the roof. But the truth is, you wired $15,000 to a rehab center in Connecticut. The patient, your brother, right?" Natalie was speechless. The little color left in her face vanished completely. I didn't want to stress you out. "No," Leo said, "you didn't want to share the truth. You were living 2 lives. One with me, one with Andrew. And the worst part is both were built on secrets. You lied to me about your family's problems. And I'm willing to bet you didn't tell Andrew about them either." Silence descended on the room once again. I nodded slowly. "That's the only thing the two of you actually have in common," I said, looking back and forth between Andrew and Natalie. "You were never honest with us, your spouses, or even with each other. You only presented a nicely packaged version of yourselves that you thought the other person wanted to see." Natalie started crying again. "I didn't want it to go this far, but you let it." I shot back. "I don't know what hurts more, being betrayed or realizing the person who betrayed you didn't even have the guts to admit they were flawed from the start." Andrew looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "I'm sorry, Anastasia. I truly am. I'm so sorry." I looked at him, a drop of pity mixing with my anger. "Sorry doesn't change the facts, Andrew. And love, if it ever even existed, can't save a marriage that's rotted at the roots." Leo stood up. He no longer looked angry, just infinitely exhausted. He looked at Natalie. "You know what hurts the most? It's not the cheating. It's the fact that you never not for a single second, thought about trusting me with your burdens. You decided I wasn't worthy of sharing your struggles. Just when it seemed all the cards of deception were on the table, when we thought nothing else could surprise us, Natalie suddenly stood up. Her hands gripped the edge of the chair. Her eyes were red from crying. But there was something else in them, a mix of fear and sheer desperation. There's something else I haven't told you. Her voice trembled. All eyes turned to her. Leo frowned. Andrew looked at her with suspicion. Natalie swallowed hard. Her eyes darted to Andrew and then rested on me. I'm pregnant. Absolute silence hung in the room. A silence so profound that the ticking of the wooden wall clock sounded deafening. Every second sliced through the air like a blade. Andrew shot up from his chair. What? What did you say? Natalie nodded, her lips quivering. I found out last week. I was going to tell you here. This weekend, she said the last sentence, looking at Andrew. Leo froze. His expression was unreadable. Then he asked, his voice barely a whisper, "Is it his?" Natalie turned to Leo, tears streaming down her cheeks again. No, it's yours. I'm sure. Andrew and I always used protection. My world seemed to tilt on its axis. For a few seconds, my mind went blank. No one had prepared us for this. There was no script, no plan on how to handle the ticking time bomb that had just detonated in the middle of the room. The creation of a new life changed the entire dynamic of this confrontation, turning it into something far more complex, far more painful. Natalie's confession hung heavily in the air. A time bomb that went off without a sound, yet its impact was devastating. A new life conceived amidst a sea of lies and destruction. For a moment, my mind shut down completely. The scenario I had so carefully plotted, the confrontation I had so coldly controlled, was just thrown into an unpredictable dimension of chaos. Andrew was the first to recover from the shock. But his reaction wasn't that of a man who just learned his mistress was pregnant. Yes, there was surprise, but horror and contempt dominated. His eyes darted rapidly from Natalie's face to her stomach and back to her face. "You're pregnant by him?" he asked, his voice strained, jutting his chin toward Leo. The way he said him with such blatant disgust made it seem like this pregnancy was an annoying complication, a stain on his perfect escapist fantasy. And for the first time all evening, I saw a flash of pure anger cut through Natalie's tears. Through her sobs and swollen face, she shot Andrew a piercing glare. "Don't call him," she hissed. "He has a name. He is Leo, my husband. And yes, I made a massive mistake by betraying him, but at least I never lied to him about my feelings for you." Natalie's words were a double slap in the face for Andrew. First, the confirmation that the baby wasn't his. Second, the implicit accusation that Andrew's love for me was nothing more than a lie. I watched Andrew take a step back. His face had transformed into an impenetrable mask. Shock, shame, or perhaps the absolute emptiness of a man realizing he had lost everything. He had lost me, and it seemed he had never truly possessed Natalie either. He was just a pit stop, a temporary escape. While the three of them were wrapped up in this new drama, I felt something strange. Clarity. Natalie's pregnancy was a shock, but for me, it changed nothing. It was her problem. It was the consequence of their actions. Her chaos was no longer my chaos. This complicated knot that had just been tied actually only strengthened my resolve to cut the strings, connecting me to all of them. I took a deep breath, calming my momentarily racing pulse. I became the Anastasia I knew again, the CFO. Calm, methodical, always focused on the bottom line. I think that's enough surprises for one evening. My voice sliced through the tension. I leaned forward, picked my bag up off the floor, opened it, and pulled out the final folder. It was burgundy. I placed it slowly on the coffee table next to the untouched bottle of wine. And since all the cards are on the table, I'm not going to drag this out. I opened the folder. Inside was a stack of perfectly collated papers. "These are the divorce papers along with all the financial documentation I've prepared," I explained. "Our joint assets have already been legally transferred to separate accounts. Everything has been vetted by my lawyer. Unlike some people in this room, I hide nothing." Andrew stared at the papers in disbelief. "Anastasia, you can't. You can read them now or refuse to sign them," I continued, ignoring the plea in his voice. "But you won't change my mind." On the other side of the room, Natalie sat back down, her hands instinctively wrapped around her stomach. Leo turned to her. The coldness on his face was slowly dissolving, making way for an expression of profound exhaustion and resignation. "I need time to process all of this," he told Natalie, his voice low but controlled. "But if you keep this baby, I will take care of it. A child isn't to blame for any of this." I saw a flash of relief on Natalie's face. She nodded, too choked by sobs to speak. "I know. Thank you for saying that." I looked back at Andrew. "I don't know if you have anything left to say, but if you do, now is the time." He lifted his head. His eyes were red, haggarded. "Anastasia," he said, None of this is worth destroying our marriage over. We have so many good memories." There it was, his final card. "Memories." I nodded. "It's true, Andrew. We had a lot of good memories. But the fact that you decided to trade all of them for the cheap thrill of an affair with someone who couldn't even be honest with her own husband means that I have to protect the rest of my life from your bad decisions." I pulled a pen from my jacket pocket. With firm strokes, I signed every page where my signature was required. In the quiet room, the scratching of the pen tip across the paper sounded distinct. Every stroke was a liberation. I was no longer clinging to a fragile marriage. I was no longer trying to trust someone who didn't deserve it. Putting the pen down, I felt lighter than I had in years. I looked at Andrew, the man who was once my entire youth, the dream of my family. "Good luck," I told him. "You're going to need it." As I stood up, Leo stood up as well. He gave a respectful nod. "I'll wait for you by the cars, Anastasia. If you need anything, let me know." I nodded back, grateful for his calm presence that evening. Just as I was about to walk out, Natalie approached me hesitantly. "I know I don't deserve to ask for forgiveness," she said softly. "But I truly never wanted it to go this far." I looked her straight in the eyes. There was no anger left, only clarity. "The most dangerous people aren't the ones who are openly bad," I told her. "They're the ones who convince themselves they are good people while continuing to live a lie." She froze at my words for a moment, then looked away. I walked out of the cabin without looking back, leaving Andrew staring blankly at the papers on the table and Natalie huddled in the corner, hugging the only thing she could cling to. The life she had just confessed was growing inside her. We left the cabin around 9 p.m. No one walked us out. There was no need. We walked in silence. Only the crunch of gravel beneath our feet broke the quiet of the night. Leo opened my car door for me, a gesture of politeness that felt strange amidst all the chaos. Then he got into the driver's seat of his car. Before starting the engine, he rolled his window down and looked at me. "Do you want to grab something to eat?" he asked. "I know a little diner in Saranac Lake. It's open late. Nothing fancy, but it's comforting." I laughed. A raspy, unexpected laugh, but it felt very real. After all the drama, the tears, and the lies, this simple question felt overwhelmingly normal. "Yes," I replied. "Let's go. I'm starving." We sat side by side in a modest diner, illuminated by a slightly flickering neon sign. Warm yellow light washed over the worn Formica table in front of us. We didn't try to analyze what had just happened. Instead, we talked about calmer things. About the time Leo considered dropping out of architecture school for pastry baking. About my dream of opening a bookstore in Maine, the idea I had abandoned after Andrew called it unrealistic. After dinner, we said goodbye with a simple handshake and a silent nod. We didn't become lovers, but that night, I realized I had found something more fundamental. A friend, someone who had walked with me through the darkest night of my life. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of a small house in Kennebunkport, Maine. I held a mug of hot French press coffee in my hands. I watched the waves of the Atlantic Ocean crashing against the rocky shore. The divorce from Andrew was finalized in less than 2 months. Thanks to my meticulous preparation, documentation of the affair, and clearly defined assets, he didn't put up much of a fight. He probably realized that the longer he dragged it out, the more he would lose. I kept the majority of our assets, including a cash buyout for the cabin in the Adirondacks, which I forced him to sell to me and then promptly sold. I didn't need a place full of ghosts. Andrew's career at the Wall Street firm stalled. His boss, a strict but fair woman, somehow caught wind of the chaos in his personal life. Officially, nothing was ever discussed, but he was slowly removed from key accounts. From being a prime candidate for managing director, he was demoted to leading a second-tier team. Natalie gave birth last week. Leo sent me a text. She's here. A healthy baby girl. Feelings are complicated, but we're trying. He attached a photo. A tiny hand gripping Natalie's finger. Leo was looking at the camera with a tenderness I had never seen in him before. I didn't know if they would reconcile as a couple, but it was clear that however belatedly, they were learning to be honest with each other and with themselves. Meanwhile, I live alone in my new house by the ocean. Not too far from civilization, but quiet enough that I can hear the wind every morning. I changed careers. I'm no longer a corporate CFO. I'm an independent financial advisor working on my own schedule, helping women going through divorce secure their futures. No more high-stress board meetings. No more midnight email bombardments. I'm also learning to stop, to rest, to breathe. Leo and I still keep in touch. Not constantly, but consistently. Sometimes it's just holiday greetings. Sometimes a text. Just saw a design for a stunning Cape Cod-style house and thought of you. And sometimes it's just a 15-minute phone call to ask, "How are you? I don't need more than that." We survived one of the longest nights of our lives together, and although neither of us ever said it out loud, I know we are friends. The kind of friendship that doesn't need labels, that is understood with a single glance. That day, I sat on my deck with a favorite book while a small Bluetooth speaker played soothing acoustic guitar. I no longer thought about Andrew. There was no more pain, no more regrets, only a peace as quiet as the sea on a windless day. I survived what once felt impossible. And most importantly, I found myself again. Andrew was an important part of my world, but he wasn't my final destination. He came into my life to teach me a very expensive lesson, to wake me up and make me realize that trust shouldn't be handed to someone who doesn't know how to protect it, that love doesn't last when honesty vanishes, and that blind sacrifice makes us forget our own worth. If someone asked me today, Anastasia, "Do you regret anything?" I would answer without hesitation. No, because some people come into our lives not to stay, but to teach us when it's time to walk away. My story isn't a tragedy. It's a journey of rebirth. From a betrayed wife, I transformed into a woman who stood her ground, healed herself, and learned to love herself again. Sometimes the loss of something clears the path for something much better. And I am grateful that I had the courage to walk away at the defining moment. 3 years. A span of time that feels like a lifetime, yet simultaneously feels like it was just yesterday. I sat on the porch overlooking the garden with my coffee and a half-filled journal. From here, I could see my small vegetable patch. Cherry tomatoes thriving, bell peppers beginning to turn red, and basil leaves releasing their fresh scent with every gust of sea breeze. In the distance stretched the Atlantic, deep and blue under a clear morning sky. 3 years ago, on a day just like this, I was sitting at a cabin in upstate New York, waiting to detonate my own world. Today, I sit here in a new world I built from the ruins. And this world feels so much sturdier, so much more real. I don't think about Andrew often anymore. Not because I consciously suppress it, but because he simply doesn't take up space in my mind. The memory of him has faded into an old movie I watched a long time ago. I know the plot. I remember some scenes. But the emotions that were once so intense are now muted, replaced by a safe distance. A few months ago, an old friend from New York texted me. She ran into Andrew at a real estate conference. She told me he looked different, thinner, much quieter. He left his prestigious firm a year after our divorce and was now working for a mid-sized developer out in Denver, Colorado. He had moved across the country, starting over from scratch. I read the text feeling absolutely nothing. No satisfaction over karma catching up with him. No lingering pain, just a calm realization. His story was no longer mine. He was a stranger with whom I had once shared a bed for years. I sent up a silent prayer that he would find peace, not for his sake, but for mine, because wishing him peace meant I was truly free. My connection with Leo has endured, blossoming into a rare and genuine friendship. We fast a time about once a month. His call caught me while I was watering the plants. His face appeared on the screen, still wearing that trademark tired smile, but there was a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Behind him, a little curly-haired girl was running around and laughing. "This is Nena." "She just learned how to pronounce my name right," Leo said with a soft smile as Nena hugged his leg. "It took her 2.5 years to decide if I'm Leo or Daddy Leo." I smiled. "You look happy. She's my whole world," Leo replied. He paused, his gaze turning more serious. "Natalie and I tried. We're good parents to Nina. But as a couple, we realized you can't glue back together what's been pulverized. We decided to amicably divorce 6 months ago. It's better this way. It's more honest. No more secrets, no more pretending, just a partnership in raising our daughter." The news didn't surprise me. Some cracks are just too deep to plaster over. "I'm sorry, but I'm glad you found an honest path forward," I said. "Yeah, honesty. An expensive lesson," he noted. "And what about you, Anastasia? Has any lucky guy managed to steal your heart out there on the coast?" "My heart isn't currently available to be stolen. I'm too busy owning it myself, and it's an incredibly satisfying feeling. My work as a financial advisor gave me a new purpose. I don't just help recently divorced women reorganize their portfolios. I listen to their stories. I see the same fear in their eyes that I once felt, the fear of the future, the fear of being alone. And I can look at them with absolute conviction and tell them, you are going to be okay. You are so much stronger than you think, and I am the living proof. I became a lighthouse for ships caught in the same storm that once battered me. I turned my scars into a map so others could find their way back to themselves. As the sun began its descent in the west, I closed my journal and walked down to the beach in front of my house. I kicked off my sandals, letting the warm sand touch my bare feet and the sea foam wash over them. People often ask me, "Have you forgiven Andrew?" For a long time, I didn't know the answer. But now I understand. Forgiveness wasn't the goal. I didn't need to grant him my forgiveness to heal. What I needed was acceptance. Accepting that it all happened. Accepting that I was once deeply hurt. Accepting that the pain changed me. And most importantly, forgiving myself. Forgiving myself for not seeing the red flags sooner. Forgiving myself for being so naive in love. Forgiving myself for thinking I needed someone else to be complete. I no longer feel empty. I am whole on my own, but I am not lonely. My life might be quieter now, but it is infinitely more peaceful. It's filled with the little things. The smell of coffee in the morning, the joy of watching my garden grow, the laugh of a client when she finally buys her first car with her own money, And of course, the sound of the ocean waves constantly whispering to me. The sky transformed into a canvas of orange, pink, and purple hues. For me, a new dawn arrived a long time ago, and every single day, I am grateful for it because I know how hard I fought to get here. I no longer look back. The future stretches out before me, as vast and beautiful as the ocean I'm staring at. And for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid to explore it alone. Thank you all for watching until the end. I hope this story sparked your interest in these deep social themes. If it touched you, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel. Let's spread positive energy and protect the light together. Thank you.